Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Hi, everybody. I'll tell you what, I'm going to start here, and I know I'm going to sound like a broken record on this, but the Great Awakening is one hell of a ride. The amount of information that continues to come out on a constant basis, and the way that the enemy is not escaping, is without a doubt controlled. And it is controlled, I think, of course, first and foremost by God himself. Again, I want to start with this particular post here because this is an interesting post that was on greatawakening.win, and I think it reigns true regarding a number of different things. Certainly the amount of disclosure that's continuing to happen, but again, how God is in control of this. And we've been told, of course, and it's in the Bible. Again, I'm not a biblical scholar, but I do know this much, that the amount of truth that does exist will be revealed to us throughout our lifetime. I don't think, though, that in our lifetimes, and certainly I would say the generations that are alive now, have witnessed this much truth be dropped and this much hidden information be publicized ever in the history of anything. Again, the hypnosis from previous generations and the reliance on the radio and television and newspaper and that general media, that's all been cracked and destroyed now. And it almost does not matter, certainly for the awake, which particular situation or scenario or story hits the so-called mainstream. Endless people can see right through it. Again, whether you're talking about Savannah Guthrie and all of that fake nonsense, or you're talking about the Epstein files or whatever story you want to bring up, all of this is being exposed again for us to make logical decisions. It's not that it's just being exposed for us to just talk about. People have to act on it. They have to act on it, and they have to live their lives as if they now know the truth. And I'll flat out give, I think, full credit to a gal who wins the internet, as far as I'm concerned. In fact, I'd go so far as to say she wins the internet forever. There was a gal on, I believe, TikTok, and she's talking into her phone, a young gal, college student, and she's screaming at the top of her lungs, "Why is it that this assignment in my class matters when we have just found out that celebrities, politicians, etc., are having sex with children and eating them?" In fact, I'm going to play her audio here right now, even though I've played it on social media and I played it in the last war video, because I want you to hear it in her voice. Because this is the Great Awakening. This is a perfect example of somebody who is waking up and can see right through all of the lies. The veil has been completely lifted on this one. And this is, again, exactly where everybody needs to end up, I think, in my personal opinion. And eventually, again, if she decides to walk away from her college or university setting and learn on her own, she's going to be far more advanced than anybody else. And then I have some more things that I'd like to read too as well. So this might, I don't know how long this episode's going to be, but it might get a little lengthy. Either way, give this awake woman a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, Professor. I'm so sorry I didn't turn in that activity. I know it was really important that I learn about Punnett squares, and I'm sure it was really informational, and I would love to get that done. But unfortunately, we all just learned as a species that every single important person in the last 50 years or so is a cannibalistic pedophile. Do you hear what the fuck I just said? Did that register at all? All of your celebrities, all of your politicians, all of your multi-million and billionaires, they're fucking and eating kids. They're eating kids. They're eating kids. They're eating kids. How the fuck is nobody upset? They're eating children. Not just Weird Dan down the street. The president, several presidents, not just of this country, of others. They are kidnapping. They are systemically selling children into sex slavery and then cannibalizing them. Are you listening to me? Are you listening to what the fuck I'm saying? We pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all. But all the people that have over $1 billion are sacrificing babies to an ancient god. I am not suicidal. My mental health is fine. I have a loving family and a great support system. I am not going to hurt myself or anybody else. But you need to fucking open your eyes. Oh, it's just a lot to handle. Well, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, yeah. Because every important person and people you've never fucking heard of are raping and eating kids.
It's not Donald Trump eating children, but certainly, again, past individuals, no doubt about it. Again, I could take this anywhere. I mean, I can take this information anywhere. You get into the Epstein files, it talks about hunting N-words. Okay? It talks about hunting black kids. It talks about, again, doing that in Africa and doing it for fun. It talks about endless things. It talks about child meat, specifically jerky. That's been outed now within these documents. That there's conversations about jerky, and I'm going to walk the jerky over to your apartment. And then people are laughing and commenting and saying, like Asmund Gold, for example, on YouTube, and saying, who walks jerky from one place to another? I didn't think jerky walked. And they're direct references to eating children and eating people and eating human flesh. This is the kind of, again, information that many of us knew about a very long time ago. And once you start, of course, learning about it and reading into it and reading and analyzing the information in the code language and the words and all of it, you again start to open up to the horrors of the world, which, of course, desensitize you to a great extent, but it allows you to shed your skin, which, as I've said, is a very good thing. And that's what keeps us human and what keeps us alive and keeps us knowledgeable. Now, let me read this particular post because this is on greatawakening.win, and this is, again, sort of a person's testimonial here. And it's well done, and I think, again, it's rather direct and to the point, and I think it's where a lot of people sit right now with a lot of this. They said the following here. First, they said, quote, "First off, I would like to say that I do not consider myself a great Christian. In fact, I have spent most of my life running from the Lord. If he did not want me to share, then why was I shown this? So here I am. The vision I had, it's weird. It's not like you're watching a movie, but you are seeing intense images in your head like big pieces rather of a fragmented puzzle. And then you realize that God has been dropping little puzzle pieces of knowledge to you your whole life. Facts and seemingly useless information throughout your entire life that probably would have been long forgotten if God had not wanted you to remember it. This account I'm going to share is not in the Bible. Christ knew when they would come for him, for he was 33. It was to be his ritual number, a ritual designed to bind his soul and send him to hell and into the arms of Lucifer. It had to be this way, for God and his Son had a plan to beat Lucifer, the master of lies, at his own game. You see, this is the story of the 3 miracles in 3 days, as it was shown to me. The problem was that hell didn't exist for Christ. It was a place for the sinner, and Christ our Lord was without sin. So God and Christ, in a divine plan, used evil against itself. By crucifying Christ in a satanic ritual, the evil ones inadvertently show our Lord the way to the one place that wasn't open to him, hell itself. So when our Lord drew his final breath on earth, he descended into the depths of hell. This was miracle number 1, the perfect Son of God descending to hell. Now it's time for miracle number 2. I'm in tears now, they said. I saw Christ standing at the gates, but they would not open. So as Lucifer becomes a wolf in sheep's clothing, Christ dons the sin of man as a cloak and becomes the lamb in wolf's clothing. And the gates are opened and our Lord enters. This is miracle number 2, the sinless Son of God entering the place of Satan. What happens next gave me chills at the time. I saw all of hell rejoicing, Lucifer mocking Jesus, taunting God, saying, quote, "I have your son," unquote, he said. I saw Lucifer sit at his throne and tell Jesus, "Now bow at my feet, Son of God," quote unquote. Jesus approached and stood at his feet, but he did not bow. Jesus simply undid his cloak of sin and dropped it at Satan's feet. The worthless sin of man was with no souls attached. A brilliant light emanated from our Lord, binding all that he tried to look, revealing the perfection, the light of God himself. The gates of hell did not just open, but they exploded outward, and Jesus walked out of hell, leaving the worthless sin of man with no souls attached behind. This was miracle number 3, for no one has ever escaped the clutches of hell, and Jesus rose on the 3rd day. 3 miracles in 3 days, equaling a divine 33, thus crossing out the evil of 33 with God's all-knowing plan, unquote. The aspect of the rabbit hole and the metaphor of the rabbit hole, and when people say you're going down rabbit holes, they usually always say the word down, because that's what it is. You're going down into a rabbit hole, and down, of course, is hell. So when a person says that they're going down a rabbit hole, they're investigating the depths of evil and how low that goes. Well, we know how low it goes. It goes down to hell. So the fact that we've seen this and we've been shown this, certainly those of us, again, who have been looking into this for quite some time, at least 12 plus years, if not longer than that, and there are many individuals who are older than me who have known about this for far longer, and so on and so on. I mean, everybody's operating on a spectrum when it comes to their awakening, but that right there is a gift of God. Because in order to see the depths of how evil people are and how evil things can be, you have to go downward. You can't just consistently look at the sky and walk around and with your hands open, acting as if everything is fine all of the time, because I went to church on Sunday, so I'm fine, and I know people who also did the same thing, so they're fine, and so on and so on. No, it doesn't work that way. You have to go downward in order to see how bright things can possibly be on the other end, because that is the spectrum. It is as dark as a person can possibly imagine and far darker, but a person has to be willing to see that and understand that. Because on the other end of that is a level of lightness that a lot of people, again, never experience. But I just wanted to bring that again out in the open here because I think that that's a consistent thing that's taking place. Again, there are spiritual forces at play here regarding everything that is going on this plane that we live on in these meat sacks that we inhabit. But it is biblical. There is no doubt about it. And you're seeing the panic among the enemies, and you're seeing them again scheme and meddle and plan and do whatever they do and do all of the things that they do. And many of them, again, cannot hide. They cannot run. And they're trying, but it's not working. Again, too many examples to even bring up. But I will mention this, just in brief. In one of the past episodes, or I'm sorry, not episodes, articles. There we go. On the past articles on my Substack channel, theamericanclassroom.substack.com, when I put together a direct link to the DOJ's Epstein videos and basically heavily redacted Epstein videos. Excuse me. You can get on there and you can again see some of the videos if you're interested. And like I said, they're heavily redacted, but you can see the different locations and you can make out the ages of some of the individuals, et cetera, et cetera. At the bottom of that article, I decided I ended up finding the link to the previous Epstein torture video that I saw many years back. I want to say around 2018. Now, what's interesting is it's redacted in that the girl is blurred out with clear blocks, basically. But I remember seeing basically a very similar video of the same situation where Epstein is torturing this girl with a magnifying glass in the sun and burning her. It's awful, to say the least, and that should go without saying, but there is a direct link to a clip of that video at the bottom of that article if, again, you can stomach it. And the reason, of course, that I stumbled across it, I don't think is accidental. You've heard me bring it up on the show before. I didn't have a link to it from the past, and the one that I saw from the past was not edited, and it was not redacted, and it was even more, I would say, high definition and from an even different angle, which would imply that there were multiple cameras on this female victim at the exact same time. Again, it's awful, and I don't recommend watching it, but if a person is desensitized to it and you can stomach it even for just a little bit, you'll see again the depths of evil that exist among these people. And again, a person in the video watching the video would also say, well, that's not Jeffrey Epstein in the video. That doesn't look like him. It kind of looks like him, but not really. It's him. It's most certainly him. Again, dressed the same hair, same face, same arms, white tennis shoes. He's wearing jeans, a red polo shirt. It's him. But let's say, for example, it's not. Who cares? It doesn't matter if it's him or it isn't. A girl is being tortured on what is presumably an island or certainly a grass field, and it's not good. But this is, again, a small taste of the kind of behavior that these people engage in, and they do it again for fun, and that is satanic. But again, we're seeing the depths of evil here, and we're seeing people who worship Satan, which means the exact opposite exists. There is a level of love and compassion that exists that people cannot comprehend. And there is a level of light that is the opposite of darkness that exists that people can also not comprehend. And they certainly don't live their lives with any of that in their lives the way that they probably could, I suppose. So, again, I'm not trying to get too preachy. I'm just saying that this is happening and that it's unavoidable. So, people can try to ignore it, they can try to back away from it, but it's coming out too quickly. And this is a part of all of this scheme too, which not even a scheme, but it's the blackpilling, which I think is ridiculous, is people are still blaming Donald Trump for something. They're still blaming him for what exactly? For ordering the release of all of this information? People need to keep in mind it's his DOJ that released this information. It's his DOJ that's allowing this dripping of information to consistently come out over the course of how long? Since 2017? They've been in control this entire time. Because again, all of this information wouldn't even see the light of day if it weren't for the Q drops before, and if it, again, weren't for social media opening up the way that it has over the years. But of course, people had to see the censorship of social media also. You had to see people, again, post the truth and then have that truth be squashed. That had to happen too. That was one of those many things that we had to experience, was the business of censorship. And that here we are trying to put the truth out to, awaken our fellow Americans and our fellow citizens around the world. Only to, again, have that be muzzled as much as humanly possible. We had to experience that and then, of course, fight through it, which we did. And it still happens to a great extent, but certainly not the way that it did in the past and not the way that it was intended to actually work in the future. And fortunately, again, that's where the battlefield continues to exist, is with censorship. But you're also seeing all of the enemies that are advocating for censorship. Of course, the Jewish lobby, Zionists, Satanists, etc., etc. All of these people are still advocating for telling the truth to be illegal. And we have to fight against that with every ounce of energy we have. Because they don't want critical thought. They just want it to be their way, and you have to believe what they say, but it's too late. They've already lost. The devil is still flailing about, but Christ has already won, which is the best part. Now, let me mention a couple other things here, because again, this is a lot of date fagging, and I fully understand how this is going to sound, but there are a lot of posts out there, of course, having to do with this. There were posts having to do with February 8th being a particular date of importance, and that something, of course, would happen on February 8th, this being Super Bowl Sunday as I'm recording this. People are predicting power outages. That's apparently from a Simpsons episode, that a power outage would take place. Let me see here. February 9th. for 72 hours. There's that. Again, I'm just mentioning this, not because I think it's actually going to happen, but just because it's out there. There's also this having to do with the emergency broadcast system and some old Q posts. There's a post here from Renee on X. It says, the Super Bowl airing globally on February 8th, 2026 will mark a historic first. Never before has every country had access to the same broadcast at the same time. Now, there's one reason why this is probably taking place, because there's a massive boycott, and of course, I'm not going to watch it, and other people aren't going to watch it either. But at the same time, it's always been rumored, certainly dating back to the early Q posts from 2018, that the EBS system, emergency broadcast system, would be aired, and then announcements would be made regarding any number of things. And again, that's where the speculation runs wild, because some people were saying, well, we would see executions of high-profile people or arrests of high-profile people, or crimes would be mentioned on national television regarding either a stolen election or crimes against humanity involving children, or whatever it might be. I'm not saying that any of that's going to happen. I'm just saying what people are discussing here online. So there's Q Post 698, which was again dated February 8th of 2018, and it just says USSS on high alert, Q. And then there's one on February 11th, 2018, which is Post 720. And it says, do people believe all recent resignations, plane crashes, plane reroutes, EMS/EBS activations, blackouts, etc. are simply a coincidence? Why did Sessions at the beginning emphasize investigations proceedings are kept confidential? Think magic. What you see, ... Do you really believe nothing is being done? It says, reread past crumbs. Who has the power? Why was this emphasized in the beginning? You have more than you know, Q. We're seeing, as the poster on GreatAwakening.win said, we're seeing these jigsaw puzzles just drop in front of us. These pieces of a jigsaw puzzle drop in front of us. They're not always connected when they drop in front of people's faces, but it's getting to the point where they're so close you can easily connect them. They're not opposite pieces on separate sides of a table, and you have to go, oh, those belong together, because of course that takes longer to figure out. These pieces are being dropped in front of us now, again, almost too close to one another in order to make the connection unavoidable. I'll mention this too. There was also a post going around over the weekend and at the end of last week with a picture of what is presumably Jeffrey Epstein with a beard and longer hair. And it was making the rounds on X, but there wasn't a single post having to do with it being AI generated. It wasn't being community noted by X either. There was no one saying, by the way, that's not Jeffrey Epstein, when normally that would be the case. Again, if you put up a picture of something on X or a video, X almost always can determine whether or not, and certainly other people can too, as to whether or not the video is fake. For example, there was a video going around of a Somali guy dressed as an ICE agent with a towel around his head in camo fatigues and the whole thing. Apparently singing the national anthem or the Somali national anthem or whatever it was at a Duke basketball game. At face value, it was funny and clearly AI generated, but there were people moving it around like it was real. And of course it wasn't. But when it came to this Jeffrey Epstein picture, people are still moving it around and it still hasn't been community noted, and people are not taking it down or saying it's AI generated or whatever. So again, you can take it for what you'd like, but as I've said in the past, do you kill an asset or do you keep it alive in order to continue to use it as much as humanly possible and wring that asset dry? Again, I don't know if he's alive or dead, and frankly, I don't care. I know that there's more than enough evidence in this information and in these drops, just within the last recent dropping of these Epstein files, that there's more than enough to investigate and more than enough to prosecute. And apparently Congress is going to be able to access this information unredacted on Monday. At least that's the rumor. So again, people are going to see a great deal of what's going on here. And these pieces, these jigsaw pieces, are too close together in order to ignore. Now, of course, one of the reasons that people and certainly the news stations are running with the Savannah Guthrie nonsense is simply because Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel are wrapped up in these Epstein files without a doubt. There's this one particular post, again from, let's see, it was sent to Jeffrey Epstein on August 10th of 2014 rather, at 9:19 p.m. And the subject was forward, photo from visit with Bibi Netanyahu. And this was from a Jess Staley, Jes. Says, I hope the ranch is fun. Great weather out here in the Hamptons. Operation on my shoulder on Tuesday. Jess Staley, Blue Mountain Capital. And then a Jacob Frankel replied back, photo from visit with Bibi Netanyahu, back to Jess Staley, and said, Jess, I found this photo from our visit with Bibi Netanyahu. Regards, Jacob. And it's redacted. Again, Benjamin Netanyahu is mentioned in these emails and in these files 6,300 times. That's not small potatoes. That's not Russian influence either. So I think, again, we know exactly who's involved here. But again, the aspect of all of this that the black pillars have to keep in mind is it was Donald Trump's DOJ, but more specifically military control, that allowed for the release of this information. That was the point. So again, if Donald Trump's involved in all of this nefarious action, why on earth would he be the one to release this information? That it, again, is exposing Israel, Mossad, CIA, child trafficking, eating human beings, the whole thing. Why would he do that? How does he benefit from any of that if he's negatively involved? He wouldn't. This is saving Israel for last. This is part of it. Now let me read this too. This was also on GreatAwakening.when. It said the following. It said, quote, Trump just made 5 moves in 48 hours and nobody is connecting the dots. Number one, move number one rather. It says, signed executive order threatening 25% tariffs on any country trading with Iran. Target, China, India, Turkey. The petrodollar stranglehold is ending. Move 2, threatened to sue his own Federal Reserve nominee if he doesn't lower rates. Quote, it was a joke, unquote. No, it was a warning. The Fed's days are numbered. Move 3, Pentagon cut all ties with Harvard. Military training, fellowships, programs, all gone. The Ivy League pipeline to power is dead. Let me elaborate on that briefly. I came across an article last week, which I didn't read on the show. I could have. But Trump is suing them for like $6 billion, if memory serves, Harvard specifically. And then, of course, Pete Hegseth put out a video describing a lot of it too, that we're no longer associating with woke institutions and XYZ, and they attacked Jews and all of that other nonsense, even though they have a female Jewish president now. Again, what you're seeing really is the fight between Zionists and those who are not Zionists. That's really the fight transpiring here. So again, they can run with they were making fun of Jewish students and Palestinian students were attacking Jewish students. Everybody knows that that's not true. Everybody knows with a brain in their skull that all of that campus nonsense that was going on years ago was a giant psychological operation, emphasis on the word again, operation, to make it look like Jewish students were being attacked and no one else was being attacked, and they're the perpetual victim and they need more laws to protect them on college campuses, when clearly that isn't the case. The Constitution is for everybody. That's the way that it works. If your feelings get hurt, too bad. You have to prove that there's a crime. Again, unfortunately, endless crimes were taking place during all those campus revolts, if that's what you want to call it, those staged protests. And the real crimes are never going to necessarily come to light, let alone all of the players. But what you can do is you can defund them, which is exactly what's happening here, which is a good thing. Again, Harvard is a Jewish institution. Columbia University is a Jewish institution. They can hire all of the Browns from India and Pakistan and whomever else that they want, and that's fine, they get to do that. But who runs the joint? Who moves the money around? And wasn't it Jeffrey Epstein that had direct connections with Harvard? And isn't he a staunch Zionist who calls everybody who isn't Jewish goyim? See what I mean? These dots here are right on top of each other. It requires no connecting. It says number 4, move 4. Trump launched Trump RX. 43 medications, Ozempic included. That's too bad. People shouldn't use that. It's poison. Big Pharma's monopoly, broken. They charged you $1,000. He's giving it for $300. And then move 3, DHS funding expires on February 13th, 6 days from now. Controlled shutdown incoming. Why? Because you can't restructure what's still running. And then they said, connect the dots. Iran tariffs equals end of petrodollar. Fed threat equals end of central banking control. Harvard cut equals end of deep state recruitment. Trump RX equals end of big pharma monopoly. DHS shutdown equals restructuring of homeland security. This isn't chaos. This is demolition. Piece by piece, system by system, pillar by pillar. The old world is being dismantled in real time, and the new one is being built while you watch. Dark to light, unquote. I agree. I firmly agree. And now there's this, and this requires a little bit of time as well, and I think it's important here too, because if anybody like me has been frustrated with the judicial system, what was happening with the judicial system, certainly from Epstein's point of view, which of course was directly related to CIA and Mossad and so on, is they were of course buying and blackmailing prosecutors, state AG's offices, judges, you name it, across the board, in every state, not just within the United States, but all around the world. The other thing that it was doing, and what they were discussing within these files, as Tori Maris says from Tori Says over on Substack, which I'm going to read a little from her article here, they were putting all of this information, any evidence basically having to do with any crime, any level of fraud, and then the names and evidence associated with those so-called crimes into a singular database that they would have access to. And by they, I mean the enemy, which means they can make evidence disappear. So they think. They can shuffle it down in the order of things to get to and then potentially never even get to it, even though you've given it to them on a silver platter. Which means, again, if something actually made its way to a court system and you think that you have all of the evidence at your disposal, they would say, sorry, we don't have that evidence doesn't exist. Even though you might say, again, in your own defense, or for your own prosecution against somebody who is guilty, you would say, no, we have the evidence here, and they'd say, sorry, it's not within our court system. You said you say you uploaded it, but we don't have it, which means we have to just move on with the case without the evidence because it didn't find its way to us in a timely fashion. It's a controlling of the entire judicial system, which she refers to as relativity. So I'm going to read just a little from her article here, but it was titled From Lolita Express to Relativity. Epstein exposes a CCP exposed evidence vault. Again, at the very beginning of the article, she says, look, it's more about, it's not that that you should dismiss it. You certainly shouldn't, but it goes beyond child trafficking and prostitution and drugs and whatever. She says the following here. She says, this time I'm not going to play nice because buried inside the Epstein disclosures is something more revealing than recycled scandal and name lists. The real exposure is structural. It is operational. It is the quiet revelation of how the United States government stores, processes, and controls evidence in one of the most sensitive criminal investigations in modern history. Not the crimes themselves, but the infrastructure used to contain them. That infrastructure is a platform called Relativity. Most Americans have never heard of Relativity, and that ignorance is part of the danger. Relativity is not a tool, quote unquote. It's the evidence command center of modern American justice. The digital vault where federal prosecutors and investigative agencies upload millions of files, run searches, assign review batches, label documents as privileged or relevant, redact sensitive material, and produce discovery for court. It is the system that determines what evidence is visible, what evidence is buried, and what evidence becomes reality in a courtroom. The Epstein files show relativity being used exactly this way, locked behind multi-factor authentication, gated access controls, compliance forms, and a contractor-managed environment. Accounts are disabled, reactivated, and provisionized through official processes. Access is controlled, evidence is centralized. And that is where the real story begins. Because once you realize that the United States legal system has consolidated the majority of its high-volume evidence processing into a small number of dominant platforms, and in many cases into a singular dominant platform or single dominant platform, you begin to see the obvious strategic weakness, a single point of failure embedded inside the justice system itself. If that platform fails, thousands of active cases stall. If it is compromised, the exposure is not theoretical, it is systematic. If its governance is influenced by external capital interests, then the question is no longer whether one case is protected, but whether the entire evidentiary pipeline is vulnerable. This is not paranoia, this is infrastructure logic. And here is where the discussion becomes darker and far more global. Because relativity is not just a piece of American software sitting safely behind courthouse walls, it is a corporate platform. It has investors, it has board members, it has growth partners, it has financial dependencies. And those dependencies matter because corporate ownership is not merely a business detail, it is an access vector, it is leverage, it is influence. It goes on. It says in 2021, private equity giant Silver Lake became Relativity's largest shareholder and gained broad representation. Silver Lake is not a Chinese firm, but Silver Lake has deep international investment exposure, including long-standing financial relationships with major Chinese technology entities and China-facing capital ecosystems. It is a world where the Chinese Communist Party has openly pursued influence through corporate infiltration, technology acquisition, and supply chain dominance. The question is unavoidable. What happens when the backbone of America's legal evidence infrastructure becomes financially entangled, directly or indirectly, with global capital networks that have CCP exposure or partners with the CCP? I'll add in Israel. I think that goes without saying, Zionists, etc. She goes on and says, this is not about claiming relativity is Chinese, quote unquote. It isn't. It is US based. But infrastructure does not need to be Chinese owned to be vulnerable to Chinese leverage. The CCP does not require ownership to exert pressure. It requires dependency. It requires access. It requires proximity. It requires the ability to insert itself into the governance ecosystem of critical systems through investments, partnerships, intermediaries, and quietly aligned financial interests. And that is exactly why relativity matters. Again, it's increasingly cloud dependent, is what she says. And then she goes on here, and she says the following. She says, and this is another reason why this matters, because just as the Hunter Biden laptop story was not only about Hunter Biden, the Epstein files are not only about Epstein. They are about who was protected, who was connected, and what the system chose to reveal versus what it chose to bury. They are about to overlap between criminal networks and political networks, between money, influence, and immunity. There is a connection here, one that intersects Epstein, elite finance, and political power in a way the public has been trained not to see. It touches the Bidens, it touches California power structures, it touches the kind of business relationships that never appear in headlines unless someone decides the wrong people have become expendable. Again, probably military, if I had to take a guess. She goes on, she says, fair warning, this time the story will not be framed as gossip. It will be framed as infrastructure. I'm just going to read a little more here because she gets into some of the emails specifically. She says, the evidence infrastructure, how America's justice system became dependent on a single platform. The document you're looking at came out of the Epstein investigation. Not the sensational parts, not the flight logs, not the client lists, not the photos people circulate like contraband because they want a dopamine hit disguised as moral outrage. This is something far more revealing. It's an email thread dated August 25th, 2021, between an FBI agent and technical support. And it's about login credentials for something called Relativity. The agent tries to log in. The system tells him his account is disabled. He requests reactivation. There's a help desk trail, a reference number, a clean, routine, bureaucratic exchange that looks like nothing. And that's exactly why it matters, because inside this boring little thread is a skeleton key to understanding how modern justice actually works. There's a contractor running the infrastructure, Pacific Architects and Engineers, PAE. There's multi-factor authentication through RSA Secure ID tokens. There's a dedicated instance URL sitting on a contractor-managed domain, and they have the domain website with Relativity after the .com. And there's a case label sitting right there in plain language, US v. Epstein. This isn't gossip. This isn't scandal. This is the operational layer. This is the evidence pipeline. This is how the United States government actually stores, controls, and processes the digital DNA of major criminal investigations. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The Epstein case wasn't just managed through prosecutors and agents, it was managed through a centralized software platform, hosted through contractor infrastructure, guarded by token-based access control, and structured like an enterprise data environment. People keep asking who Epstein was connected to. They should be asking what the government was connected to. Because this one boring quote-unquote document doesn't just show you an FBI agent needing access. It shows you the architecture of American justice. And it looks a lot more fragile than anyone wants to admit, because Relativity is not some random software the FBI happened to use for one case. Relativity is the evidence command center for modern American justice. It's the platform where federal prosecutors, FBI agents, SEC investigators, attorneys generals, and their contractors dump the raw digital wreckage of an investigation and turn it into something courtroom ready. It's where the government uploads millions of files and begins the process of turning chaos into narrative. Emails, phone extractions, financial records, scanned documents, cloud exports, text messages, server polls, everything. Again, the article goes on. I'm going to leave it there. But I hope you understand, again, that this is remarkably dangerous. That when you have all of this evidence for not just a singular individual, but all of the people and organizations, which of course leads to other people within those organizations and governments and three-letter agencies, et cetera, when all of that is within one specified hub or one location online, as she said and alluded to, certain people can access it, certain people can't. And if certain people are attempting to access it who believe that they have the right to access it because they are law enforcement or whomever, and all of a sudden they can't access it, that's being done on purpose. Not to mention information being deleted from those servers and from that central access point is something that would most assuredly happen, certainly if someone was paid off in order to get rid of said information. So again, we're not talking about manila folders in metal filing cabinets anymore. We're talking about, again, as far as the judicial system from a nationwide basis, everything in a centralized location online, where again it's open to vulnerabilities. Very specifically, the ability to again filter out information and only provide certain information while, again, permanently deleting other information. That's some dangerous shit. In fact, let me just read the end of this here because she makes an excellent point. It's not that it's just that it just creates vulnerabilities. It creates dependency, which she brings up. And again, she openly states that it allows individuals, again, to take a mountain of information and copious amounts of evidence, and it allows the individual looking for evidence to, again, filter things down very quickly within a short amount of time, almost, again, like a search engine might. Or like, for example, when you put a series of PDF documents within a folder, you can find particular words within those PDF documents by just typing in the words that you're looking for, and then you can see the context around the words. If you're looking for a person's name or a location or an event or a date, it becomes easy to find, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. However, if you're trying to look for nuance and specificity within a particular case, things like that can be a little bit more difficult because you're just hung up on keywords as opposed to actually reading the entire document and taking in all of the evidence. She says that's what this looks like in practice. She says the following here, quote, relativity isn't used by a handful of firms. It's used by almost all of them. It's used by 198 of the 200 largest law firms in the United States. It has hundreds of thousands of users spread across dozens of countries. It reportedly manages well over 100 billion files. The DOJ uses it, the FBI uses it, the EPA uses it, the FTC uses it, the SEC uses it, state attorney generals use it. And when federal prosecutors need to comb through millions of corporate emails in a price-fixing investigation, or the SEC needs to sift through a sprawling insider trading case, or a RICO prosecution involves years of intercepted communications and device extractions, the same platform keeps appearing: relativity. This isn't market leadership, she says. This is dependency. The American justice system has effectively outsourced the mechanical process of evidence management, the process, indexing, filtering, reviewing, tagging, and producing of digital reality, to a private platform, and it has done so at such scale that relativity has quietly become a single point of failure inside the legal system itself. If relativity suffers a major outage, cases don't slow down, quote unquote, they stop. Investigators lose access, attorneys lose access, evidence becomes unreachable, deadlines collapse, discovery production halts, trials get delayed, justice becomes bottlenecked behind a login screen. And if relativity is compromised, not by some Hollywood basement hacker, but through something far more realistic and far more dangerous: corporate governance, investor influence, board-level pressure, strategic partnerships, insider access, then the vulnerability is not limited to one case, one office, or one agency. It's systematic. Because the evidence pipeline for American justice runs through a single choke point. And that choke point is controlled by a private company with private investors and private interests. Most Americans have never heard of relativity, and that ignorance is part of the danger. The public thinks justice happens in courtrooms under flags, with judges and gavels and dramatic speeches. But the truth is, justice now happens inside platforms. It happens inside systems like this. Systems that the public doesn't see, doesn't understand, and has never been asked to question. And the company's origin story matters because it explains how something this critical, something this close to the national security bloodstream, ended up in private hands, wrapped in global finance, and embedded so deeply into government operations that we no longer have a legal system without it. She wraps up and says, relativity didn't begin in some sleek Silicon Valley weapon built by billionaires in a glass tower. It began as COALGOA, K, capital C-U-R-A, a tiny software consultancy founded in 2001 by Andrew Sieja, S-I-E-J-A, a 25-year-old son of Polish immigrants working out of his garage in Chicago. And I don't mean garage, quote unquote, the way tech founders used it as a branding mythology. I mean, they were broke. They were so broke, the office was furnished with a single green couch bought for $25 at a garage sale. And then you have to pay to keep reading the article, which I'm not going to pay. But there you have it. It's lifting the veil. It's what's behind the curtain. And again, I have no reason to doubt it because it's in the files themselves. They openly discuss this kind of thing. And again, if you've ever wondered why justice moves slowly or not at all, even at face value when there should be a crime, this is the reason. Because people's access to the evidence when they need it is being stopped or halted completely. Because either they're a Boy Scout and they're trying to get down to the brass tacks and the root of the problem, or they're corrupt as hell. And they're the ones actually in control of it or deleting evidence or keeping people from being able to access the evidence. I'm going to leave it there for now regarding that, but that's huge. That's a very, very big deal. And again, it's a nice reminder to understand the depths of this control and the depths of the corruption because, again, if it seems like things are moving slowly and things aren't working at the speed with which they should, certainly when, again, it's cut and dry as to who broke the law and who didn't, this is a part of the Civil War. The Civil War is data acquisition and people's ability to access this data and who's keeping people from accessing the data, certainly the individuals, again, attempting to prosecute at local levels about this, that, and the other. There's so many battles going on that we can't even see that I think that article right there and certainly the business of judicial relativity or just the relativity program itself openly exposes a great deal of the reason as to why all of that's taking place. Again, I don't like it. It's awful, to say the least, but it's been weaponized, and it's been weaponized that way on purpose. It's centralized control over critical information. So, yeah, it's the definition of corruption. Now, one more thing here before I move on to education. I mentioned a Super Bowl commercial, of course, that's already making the rounds on the internet having to do with quote-unquote stop Jewish hate. Apparently, that blue square, whatever it is, the Jewish blue square thing, whatever the hell, apparently that's put together by Robert Kraft, or at the very least help funded by Robert Kraft. I'm not a Robert Kraft fan, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it almost indicates again that the Patriots are sort of destined to win the football game. Again, I'm not going to watch the game, but you can guarantee that if there's a call one way or a call the other way, then it's pretty much going to shift in the direction of the Patriots. So, if anybody was curious, I'm going to air this episode here on Sunday, even on all the podcasting audio streams. That way, again, it gives you something interesting to listen to instead of watching the controlled Super Bowl and all of that corruption nonsense. So there you go. Okay. Education. I would put the education system in the exact same barrel as the relativity program. Why is it that everything gets worse and nothing changes? Why is it that it's almost impossible to change anything and grasp the real problem and then fix it when it slips right through your fingers almost every single time? Which is exactly what I've said, is that the only way that you can really fix it, so to speak, is by destroying it. And the only way that you do that is by walking away from it. As it turns out, Turning Point USA has a great deal to do with not only mass surveillance, but making sure that you cannot manipulate the education system. And the joke, of course, is that they have always played the anti-woke, we're against the gay books in schools and all that stuff, when in fact they're probably not. They're just interested in control. So there's a 20-minute video which I think deserves certainly being listened to by the listeners of this show. And I've reposted it on my X account, and it's from, Dankus, D-A-N-K-S, or Danks, however you want to say that, at Dank Starental, if I'm saying that right. It says the following here: new video just dropped. I have come to my personal conclusion on why Turning Point USA needs every school in America. It's not education, it's data harvesting. Andrew Colvett went on Fox News and gave the entire operation away over one private school that said no. Why would TPUSA with 10,000 plus chapters go to war over one school? Because every school they miss is a gap in the surveillance map. And he lays it out, and it makes sense. Again, their connections with Palantir, their connections with Peter Thiel, the drones that they use to, again, data harvest students that would show up at their events, and they would fly drones over top of these individuals, again, picking up their wireless signals from their cell phones, among other things, facial recognition, you name it. But apparently they're harvesting a lot of this information in all of places. Kiev, however you want to pronounce it, Ukraine. And this individual openly says, why would you do that? If you're such an American company, why are you keeping information of Americans in a foreign country, in a place that is supposedly at war? Again, Turning Point USA is Zionist. They call themselves Turning Point USA. Well, think about that name, as I've said on the show. What exactly are you trying to turn within the United States? Is America the turning point? Are you turning things around because you're the enemy and you're trying to, again, upend what actually exists in America? We know that Erica Kirk is a grifter. We know that the Andrew Colvett guy is a grifter, and all the people that are affiliated with TPUSA are grifters. Certainly Charlie Kirk was a grifter because, again, he was willing to go along with his own fake assassination. But he lays out again that this is probably about data harvesting, and this is probably about data harvesting of minors from very young ages all the way through adulthood. Again, what does that sound like? It sounds like a Bolshevistic Jewish tactic to me, because that's what they do and that's what they're interested in. They've openly said it. They said it in the Harrison Smith 14, 15-minute clip video that he had. Again, we're going to find you. We're going to track you throughout your entire life. We will be the ones who decide whether or not you get married or can legally. We'll be the ones who decide whether or not you end up in the school of your choice. We'll be the ones that end up deciding whether or not you end up employed or not. Again, this is part of the surveillance state that they use against us, is to monitor everything that everybody says. The reason that I say what I want to say when I want to say it is because I say F you to all of them. I'm not going to play their game. But parents, again, who are sending their children to these schools, who are logging into these Google Chromebooks and are being surveilled on a constant basis through the security systems that exist throughout these school systems, not to mention their own cell phones and XYZ. I mean, they're the victims of all of this also. They are the target. However, the other thing that this guy brings up in his 20-minute video is he basically says that TPUSA was probably on the verge of being brought up on criminal charges of fraud and money laundering, with Charlie Kirk involved, which is, of course, why they wanted to get Donald Trump elected also. Again, they are Israeli, but at the exact same time, if you think of the relativity system from the judicial standpoint of view, it's quite possible, again, that certain evidence against TPUSA would be deleted to benefit or blackmail the people who are guilty of fraud within TPUSA, which, let's face it, it's all of them. And then at the exact same time, they would get off scot-free. But can you prosecute somebody who's allegedly dead when in fact he's not, and then go after the people who are allegedly the victims of his death, like his so-called wife, who really isn't his wife? Do you prosecute those individuals for a lack of sympathy? Or do you even go after them at all? Do you not go after them because you're sympathetic? And you say, oh, that poor woman, she lost her husband, so we're not going to charge her with fraud. Again, you know that the real evil behind the curtain knows that Charlie Kirk is not dead, and all of this, again, was a giant scheme to move money, move names, move ownership, ship it all around, and make it look like, again, they weren't engaging in any kind of fraud whatsoever. The thing is this, I would use a smell test, just a basic smell test. If something stinks, even just a little bit, like a person or even an organization, then you have to know that more of it smells. It's no way that it's just one person or one act or one speech that they give, or a fake dabbing of their eye all of the time and pressing up against their cheek when no tears are coming out. It's not emotion or emotion that is the only thing that smells in any of this. It's that if you look behind the layer even deeper, or metaphorically you go further down that rabbit hole, it's all dirty. And the number of people engaging in it is all dirty. Again, go back to the origin of TPUSA. Where did they come from? They came out of nowhere. Literal nowhere. It's like a rabbit out of a hat. But the hat is Jewish. And the rabbit is just the person that they want you to focus on, which was Charlie Kirk. And all of a sudden, he was on a stage. And all of a sudden, he had campus-wide tours. And all of a sudden. Guess who else is wrapped up in TPUSA and funding TPUSA events around the state of Ohio? Vivek Ramaswamy. Vivek Ramaswamy is directly tied to this fraud also, but that's because birds of a feather flock together. And fraud knows fraud. And fraud supports fraudsters. And fraudsters support fraud, and back and forth. His entire lecture series on college campuses, quote unquote, was funded by TPUSA. He didn't pay for it. It's Israeli money. It's laundered money. It's a deep web. But again, people have to make sure and not vote for the people who are affiliated with these groups. This is also why they go after youth, because they know that youth don't understand any of this. They know that youth aren't going to pay attention to these details. And they're not going to follow these threads, and they're not going to go down those rabbit holes and connect those dots and hang those yarn strings on the wall like a conspiracy theorist who's actually critically thinking. They're not going to do that. They're just going to go, oh, this guy says things that a politician doesn't, not knowing that a Vivek Ramaswamy and TPUSA are just that. They're all controlled and they're all politicians. And they all come from that acting school in trying to get votes, trying to get support, and then they want your money, your ID, your facial recognition, and they want to track your ass for the rest of your life. And if you so much as say something or do something that they don't like, well, they got you. Remember the Vivek Ramaswamy story I told about how a friend of mine went to the campus of Miami University and they only let in the students and then they stopped all of the older citizens and they had two completely separate lines, segregating both, let all the students in first, and then they stopped all the again, people with jobs and taxpayers and people who know better and people who would actually ask a realistic question to a person like Vivek. They stopped that line entirely and didn't let any of them in. That wasn't an accident. That was on purpose. And as everybody was standing in a line, they had drones flying over top of everybody's head. Pitch black out, but again, they had drones flying over, identifying people and gathering people's cell phone data and everything else that they were doing. None of that is authentic. None of that is clean. None of that even looks authentic or clean. But you have, again, Casey Putsch, who's going around the state for governor of the state of Ohio during his campaign. He's going into small-time bars, small-time restaurants, all across the state. He's having a beer and he's talking with people like an American. And he's saying this right here is authentic because it's obviously authentic. This is exactly how people are supposed to communicate. This is how our country was built. It wasn't built by Israeli money and throwing an Indian on a stage to tell people things that they think that they want to hear, when in fact, it's really just a bunch of empty words and Vivek Ramaswamy is saying nothing. Again, there's an authenticity here that has to be highlighted and has to be shown throughout this entire Great Awakening. Because again, there's a great deal of fraud in every avenue of our lives. With any agencies, certainly government agencies and or politicians that people associate with, but then there's also not fraud. And there's real, authentic people who are out there who are hardworking entrepreneurs who just want to, again, get out of the way of the American people, enforce the law, and make things easier for the average American. And then there's, of course, unfortunately, people with their own agendas. And those are the worst of the worst. So I've said it before. I went off on a tangent there. Again, I'll get back on education here in just a second, but you get what I'm saying. I mean, There's a clear choice from an authenticity standpoint. You can, again, in the state of Ohio, for governor, I suppose, in the upcoming primary here in May, you can vote for a Vivek Ramaswamy who comes from the Obama school of political talk as far as an Indian is concerned, or you can go with Casey Putsch, who's an Ohioan, who lives here, who's actually done something. Now, I made mention of this last week too, and I finally found the clip. So my apologies. I described it, I think, in a previous episode, but I wanted to play it here. This was a particular recent video of a Black American, and he comes up to a lectern at a school board meeting. I don't have the school, and I don't know the location. My apologies. But he's reading again from one of these gay books. Well, the first time that I saw one of these clips, or I saw this clip specifically, I thought to myself again, how long have we been hearing about this? How long has this act been transpiring and taking place? And the fact is it's been going on for what, 15 years? The business of reading gay books within schools and people being outraged about it, it's been approximately 15 years, give or take, maybe a little less than that, maybe 10 years. But that's 10 years too long. The moment that one of these texts gets read should be the moment that the books like this disappear from the library and every parent pulls their child out. But the brainwashing is so thick that that's not happening. They either think it's a one-off or they support the book and they support the authors that write these kinds of books. There's this aspect also, which again shows the brainwashing, is that in the video itself, which you can't see, of course, but either way, you can hear the lack of grumbling, and you can certainly hear any lack of response is that these school board members don't respond to the speaker unless their time is running out. Or again, they get emotionally charged and they end up saying something in return, but you can just see the blank looks on their faces. Like they don't even care that this is being read or that a book like this exists within their own school library. But that's part of the brainwashing. And that's also a part of the judicial relativity that certainly exists, because it's not just as simple as a book in a library. You'd think it'd be that simple. And many people do think it's that simple, but it's not. It's direct ties to the American Library Association, their communist ties, their direct ties to Israel, their money laundering, and the reason why these books end up in these environments in the first place. And as we know, which it'll lead to the next story I read here from my most recent Substack, it has to do with the sexual confusion of minors, which leads ultimately to their sexual grooming, which leads to their untimely death. So give this American reading this perverse book and certainly excerpts out of it within this school board meeting in 3, 2, 1.
All right, so your district is infamous because you all are finding creative ways to push perversion upon children. Number one, you have a book entitled Queer, the LGBTQ Guide for Teens in that school district. The book reads, genital stimulation can come from any body part. You can use your hands or your hips or your feet, or you can rub your private parts on someone's thighs, arm, butt, genitals, ankles, wherever. You may stroke his penis. Insert fingers into his anus. You may want to consider using a rubber glove to help prevent the spread of disease like syphilis. Here's some advice for Pride Month. Don't put your fingers in someone's butt. You also have a book entitled What Girls Are Made Of. It reads, eat him and drink him and do with him what I will. She was talking about worshiping Jesus. But come on, she was talking about sex, right? Sex with Jesus. That was what she wanted, to give Jesus head. And I totally understand it. So this book endorses giving oral sex and sucking the penis of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. You should be ashamed of yourselves for allowing this kind of smut and filth to be in the school district. And we will make sure that this nation sees you willful cowards who support this kind of mess. Look at the men who are on this board and the superintendent. How can you all claim to be men, providers and protectors and priests of your homes? And you allow a boy with a penis, not with a vagina. Men don't have vaginas. Let me get that clear. And they can have man boobs, but they don't have breasts. And men should not have the right to go into the women's restroom and defraud women of their privacy. I know we have some feminists on this board, ones that don't even want to look at me. What about the feminists in here? Don't you want to protect women? A woman's right to choose? A woman's right to have her voice? What about protecting the little girls who now have to go to school and contend with someone pushing sexual harassment upon them? That's what you're doing. But when men become neutered in our culture, they lose their voice. And this issue should not persist with the number of men who are on this board. I said every man that's on this board, if you're not speaking up loudly about this, you are complicit. You are a punk, you are a coward, and you are the reason why this is taking place. And God forbid, because the DOJ and the DOE is coming, sir, and you better be prepared. Thank you.
You can bankrupt these places overnight. Doesn't take long. Overnight. You just don't go. A weekend comes around and then all of the sudden what? Half of the building doesn't show up. Half of the student population doesn't show up because they've immediately withdrawn. Or they've all taken a sick day. And then everybody in the building is wondering why half of the student population isn't there. Is something wrong? Is everybody truant? Is there something going on that I don't know about? It would throw them into a state of utter confusion because control is all they know. Which means when you take the control away from them, because you as a parent, and children, of course, are the ones, specifically parents, of course, they're the ones that have ultimate control over their children. Once you take that control back, it throws these government agencies and these government daycare schools into complete chaos. They have no idea what to do. I've laid this out 1,000,000 times on the show. It's so easy and so fun to think about, it's insane. But I'm shocked that it hasn't happened en masse at least one time. People will organize an ICE protest and an ICE walkout and advocate for illegality and not show up to school, but they won't advocate for legality by not showing up to school and by not showing up to these illegal environments. Again, theoretically, you don't go on a Monday. Everybody's gone, or half the population. Only the leftists and the brainwashed and the physically handicapped and the retarded show up. But those, again, with good homes, with good values, the thinking people, the independent thinkers, they all of a sudden don't show up. The school wonders why. Maybe they think it's a one-off. Well, now you're throwing them for a loop. Now you're the one in control. Now you have the end of the leash. It's not the other way around. And then Tuesday rolls around, and whoops, look at that. They're still not there. So they're gone now twice. Are they missing something? And then on day 3, you unenroll. Everybody, the 50 some odd % that aren't showing up to the school district, instantly unenroll. And you pull them out forever. You'll bankrupt the school district. Bankrupt them. They'll get so little money, they'll have to fire half their staff, consolidate all their buildings, and that'll be the end of it. It'll throw them in complete and utter chaos, and you'll put them in a position they've never been in before in their entire careers, let alone multi-generational experiences. I mean, no one's experienced such an exodus, but that's why that's the answer, because it's the only move that hasn't been made. Once that move gets made, it's game over. It's happening incrementally, which is fine, I guess. Less and less people are attending, more people are homeschooling, online learning, etc., etc. But a mass exodus at once would be like dropping a bomb right on top of their heads, metaphorically. That's what has yet to happen. But as far as the LGBT gay agenda is concerned, as I've written before on Substack, its purpose is the untimely death of minors. That leads me to my last Substack, which was motivated by LGBTQ sending me a text message. And he sent me the following. He said, quote, which I put this again in the Substack. He said, another day in Palo Alto, which, of course, California, another transgender high school student throwing himself in front of the train. And all the locals can do is blame the train tracks, the high-pressure environment at the school, including by parents and other students, but almost nothing on the transitioning with hormone therapy and other drugs, with parents, schools, and doctors pushing the transition. The mom of the now deceased male, in this case, was a piece of work, recruiting other trans kids on Discord to stay at her home as a quote-unquote safe space. Can't make it up. The last 3 suicides, he said, by train have been trans students. The kid left a suicide note, blaming, of course, Brent Klein, the principal at Palo Alto High School. And then he says, notice he blames his own living as transgender as the cause and how he annoyed everyone around him. Then AJ said, my son said the same about a former friend who converted. Hormone blockers made the person insufferable to be around. Again, the business of allowing puberty blockers, hormone regulators, hormone blockers, etc., is not only demonic, it's poison. And when you disrupt the natural functioning of the human body chemically, and you chemically castrate people, you're not just chemically castrating them from a genitalia standpoint, you're castrating their mind. You're separating their mind from their God-given body, which is demonic. It's satanic. But you need brainwashed people to advocate for and support that kind of thing, which, as we all know, is directed at minors. Why is it directed at minors? Depopulation. If you can confuse a young child and get them on drugs while they're young, then you can sexually molest them, traffic them, get them drug addicted, get them homeless, and then they get dead. That's the long-term and short-term goal of the entire LGBTQ alphabet soup bullshit agenda. That's it. Always has been. It just increases with time, takes on different names, shapeshifts, because it's designed to shapeshift, because it has to. Again, I'm not going to read the suicide note. It's clearly as confusing as a suicide note would be for a teenager who's clearly confused and chemically castrated and being drugged and 1,000 other things. But again, it doesn't matter if the principal was blamed or not. Either the principal was going along with this kind of an agenda, or they weren't going along with the agenda, and the people who were going along with the gay agenda were against the principal. Either way, the likelihood of the principal going along with the gay agenda is probably likely, certainly given the geographic location and what seems to be in the water out there for some of the people. But again, that's the long and short-term plan of the entire thing, is an untimely death. And this is the part, again, which I highlight in the article, having to do with a lot of the longitudinal studies when it comes to suicide rates among those that identify as something that they are not. That when you play pretend and you find your way into one of these studies that is studying, again, like, for example, suicide rates among those who are pretending, the people who are consistently pretending are more likely to kill themselves as opposed to those that are not. You can take it a step further, and it openly says, again, those that are pretending and are suicidal because they're pretending, they happen to be on drugs. So there's an angle where they try to bend the studies to make it sound like if you're on hormone blockers, your chances of suicide decrease. But what they fail to tell you is that the person is already suicidal. It doesn't mean that they go from being 100% suicidal to not being suicidal at all. It means they go from being something like 75% suicidal down to 45% suicidal. So your odds of killing yourself if you're playing pretend and drugging yourself and chemically castrating yourself go from being the chances of over a coin toss to a coin toss. Again, that's not a good statistic any way you slice it. But that's what these schools advocate for. That's what American schools advocate for. And parents keep sending their children. Don't say it isn't brainwashing. Don't say it's not effective. It most certainly is. I have two more things here. One of these is an education academy. I use that word loosely, education, let alone academy, that was thrown my way by a family member of mine in Missouri. And this is called, and you can look this up yourself, it's called COALGOAcademy.com. CODEALGO academy.com. And this is run by, it looks like an African woman and a Somali, if I had to take a guess. It seems suspicious. But I'm going to read the About section and you'll see the suspicion at face value. It says the following here, quote, "Our mission is to democratize access to high-quality coding education, empowering all K-12 students, particularly Black and brown children, to develop critical thinking, creativity, and problem-solving skills. We equip students with the real programming skills and experiences necessary to thrive in a technology-driven world, fostering a love of learning and preparing them for successful futures in diverse fields. We prioritize career readiness, especially for our high school students, providing pathways to in-demand tech careers through hands-on projects, mentorship, and industry connections. We strive to increase diversity with the tech sector by connecting students to internships, apprenticeships, and job opportunities while cultivating an inclusive and supportive learning environment for all." Well, that's not true, because in your first sentence, you said it's for Black and brown children. So what's this inclusive and supportive learning environment for all? It says to create a future where every student, regardless of background, has the skills, confidence, and opportunities to thrive in the digital age. We envision a world where coding is as fundamental as literacy, where Black and brown students are equally represented in high-paying tech careers, and where diversity drives innovation in every industry, which means not hiring white people. Through engaging, accessible education and strategic partnerships, we aim to empower the next generation to lead, create, and shape a more inclusive and equitable future in technology. And their leaders, co-founder and CEO, is a Trumfia Fulks, and the other co-founder and CTO is a Cedric Hibbler. Neither one white. Again, highly suspicious, and they apparently attempt to teach online through a paid subscription of $21 a month or whatever it is, hundreds of dollars a year, to teach your child to code, but specifically Black and brown children. Again, suspicious, I think. But again, who's to say? Certainly seems like it. Again, I don't understand what this is. It looks like, at the very least, it's a game of sorts. It looks like there is coding involved. And it looks like it's, again, kind of a grooming platform to have foreigners or children who are not white learn how to code and get involved in the tech business at a very young age to then, of course, do what? Engage in fraud in the future like we're seeing with the Somali population across the United States? Who's to say? Just throwing it out there as an example of something that you should probably never allow yourselves to be associated with. Okay. In conclusion, give this a listen. This is approximately 8 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. Let me check the timestamp on this. 7 minutes and 45 seconds. This is very well done. This is a Peter Boghossian, if I'm saying his name right, and he's apparently on a college campus. He's talking to a male liberal, and he's trying to get the male liberal to demonstrate to him what systemic racism means. And the liberal who believes that Americans are systemically racist can't describe it. So there's three voices you're going to hear in this audio. You're going to hear the moderator who is off screen discussing what conversation is being had. There's Peter Boghossian, if I'm saying his name correctly, who has a microphone, and he's asking this particular individual, who again looks like a hipster leftist, asking him again about what he means by systemic racism, and does it exist on a spectrum, and so on and so forth, and what facts would you need to explore that maybe the way that you think is not real. And what you're going to hear is full-blown brainwashing. So much so that he arrives at the conclusion that it doesn't matter what facts exist, he's not changing his mind. And that right there is Brainwashing 101. So give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
This is by far one of the most fascinating interactions Peter Boghossian has captured on camera.
Americans specifically are racist because your little America is racist. Better question is Americans are racist.
He comes up against one of the most brainwashed students I have ever seen, who claims that America is uniquely systemically racist.
So you said the word systemic before. What is that the word you use, or is this system? System. What does that word mean?
Now, this is going to be the big question. Can he explain what a system even is? This is where it gets comical.
I mean, it's the violence inherent within the system, to quote Monty Python.
So when someone makes this claim, the smart question is, well, can you give an example?
Give me an example of a law currently on the books that's racist.
Doesn't have to do with laws. It has to do with entrenched social movements.
What's an entrenched social movement? Well, we don't know, which is convenient because that makes it impossible to provide evidence. But this is what Peter does well. He does not stop.
So give me an example of a system that's racist that in the United States. Is it in the United States? Yeah, in America.
A system that's racist.
Yeah.
The best he can do is bring up, well, I have this gender studies class, and this ties in, I think. And
I've particularly been studying gender relations at the moment.
But let's try to. I'm happy to do that claim.
Well, no, I know, but it's the same sort of dichotomy. It's the same sort of power relation.
And this is what shows it is an ideology. He's able to use what he learned in his gender studies class to explain systemic racism somehow.
In terms of gender as opposed to racism.
Is it okay if we do racist? Because that's only the claim now. We'll talk about gender if you want to write another one on the board. But give me an example of a system of racism that we currently have in the country.
A current system of racism.
Yes, if you're going to claim that America is systemically racist, you should be able to give us an example of a racist system.
Yeah, we'll forget laws. Forget laws. Just give me a system.
It's more just how people act with each other. So, like, literally what she's described earlier, this sort of circumstance in which somebody...
Her friends.
Yeah.
I mean, how is that a system?
Because we're in a people are systemic. So people cause systems, and systems cause people.
People cause systems, and systems cause people, okay? So the natural question would be, but what is a system still?
Culture, or the way we act, sort of determines what the system is, or what laws are, which you seem to be hung up on.
I threw the laws out the window. I'm just trying to figure out what the definition of a system is.
You also can't throw it out. It's just a matter of
correction. We'll bracket it. But I'm trying to figure out when someone says a systemic thing, she did not say that. You said that. I'm trying to figure out what you mean by that because I am not clear.
Well, I mean, she brought up, for example, the police. Yeah. It's not that they have laws that direct them to be racist. It's that internally, somehow, people are racist. Which determines behavior in any given circumstance. Like, if a police stops a white person, they're less likely to arrest them than with a black person.
If a crime has been committed, you're claiming they're less likely to arrest them for that crime if they're white. Where are you getting that from?
You might call it even individual, but it's everybody does it.
If everybody does it, how is it systemic?
Is that what you mean by the system being racist? It's populated by people who hold racist. Is that what I'm trying to figure out what the word means?
Okay, so it's populated by people who are racist, yes,
Okay.
but also they're not exceptional. Like they're not members of the KKK. They're just people,
Okay.
and people are generally Americans specifically are racist because what your little America is racist. Better question is Americans are racist.
What makes Americans uniquely racist versus all other people in the world?
I'm trying to, and I don't mean to linger on this necessarily, but I think it's so important to understand what you mean when you say it's a system.
Okay. All right. It's a system.
And he still can't tell us what a system is.
Does that mean that the system is acting against Black people or individuals within the system? Because that's an extremely crucial distinction.
Okay. So individuals within the system that are not exceptional. So they constitute the system. So like it's not members of the KKK that are joining the police because they're racist or whatever.
They constitute the personnel who are members of the system, but they are not the system.
Yep, they are.
Peter, bless him, is still trying to figure out what a system is. This is the best you can do. Continue to ask.
People make up the system. So people make the system. The laws. Literally any.
So when he finally realizes he's not going to get a response, he asks him, what would it take to change your mind?
What would it take for you to move from strongly agree to agree?
I don't think I would.
And he just flat out says, nothing would change my mind.
So what evidence would you have to hear? What reason would you have to hear? What argument would you have to see to persuade you?
I see no point in being an agree or slightly agree.
He sees no point in a middle ground.
I'm either going to be in strongly agree or strongly disagree.
If you're taking the position you strongly agree, then surely you must have some evidence.
But I just don't understand. So what? Okay, then what evidence would it take you to move to strongly disagree? What would you have to be shown?
That America is not racist.
Okay, and what would that look like? What data set would that look like?
I have no idea because I don't agree with it.
And that pretty much sums up the entire thing right there. I don't even know what evidence would look like because my mind has been made up.
Like, how would I know? Or else I would be over there.
Well, wouldn't you have to know the conditions under which your belief could be false to justify your confidence in the belief?
Could be false.
Or maybe it's just that it's not as racist as you thought. Like, what evidence would you have to think that it's not as racist as you thought to move you to the agree line?
I don't know, that a lot of people don't experience racism on the day-to-day.
Okay, so what is a lot?
A lot of people, or the majority of people, or some people? Like, a lot meaning like 25?
Well, more people than I've heard. I don't know. I guess if it's a gradient, which I'm still not convinced it is. It's just is or is not.
And that sums the whole thing up. There is no gradient. He will not even entertain the idea of nuance. It either is or it is not.
It's just is or is not to me, really, because of its systemic nature.
I think also what's fascinating is that with individuals like that, and them being products of the Matrix, which is clearly what it is, he's describing what he thinks is systemic, which is a system of racism. What he doesn't understand is he's a victim of a system, a matrix, that has taught them that that's true, when in fact it isn't. It's not racism. It's race preference. It's pattern recognition. It's instincts. It's knowledge on statistics, demographics, geography, behavior. But again, as the guy said, he doesn't understand nuance. He doesn't understand specificity. It's just this or it's that. It's one way or another. It exists in its entirety or it doesn't exist at all. What I find fascinating is you can't even have conversations with people like that. So, believe it or not, that sort of puts him a step ahead because he's actually interested in conversing about it. As false as he is, And as brainwashed as he is, he's at least attempting to justify his position by talking out his feelings. Nothing he says is factual, but again, he's bringing up his opinions, which are, ironically enough, not his. They're someone else's that he's just repeating. But the full-blown brainwashed are the ones, again, who you can't even talk to. They're the ones that yell, scream, and shout, break something, and then run away. Or they don't even, again, engage whatsoever. They just walk right past it and they say, I'm the one who has it all figured out. I'll never talk to you. And again, and this is, I think, the bigger part is that it proves that they don't want to learn. They're literally not interested in learning anything ever. Because heaven forbid if they did, they'd start to chip away at the false armor that they have on themselves and the skin that they have on. And they would start to shed that skin and break away that armor and realize that the stance that they had on the issue that is at hand, whatever stance or issue they have, is false. But then explaining to them that it's been perpetuated on them with purposeful falsehood, that's a separate pill to swallow. And that would be difficult for them to even grasp also. But again, many people don't even want to converse. Some people say they want to converse, but they don't want to change their minds, just like this guy. This guy willfully walks up to this Peter guy, who has a brief experiment question on a placard, and then people can randomly come up and he can converse with them if they choose to. But he still decides that he's not changing his mind on anything. Even though he's posed with very good questions that he still doesn't want to think about answering, let alone think about answering accurately, which is the absence of thought. That's the Matrix. That's somebody who's plugged into the Matrix. Again, he's a victim of the very system and systemic system of thinking that he actually is against, but he's in it. And by participating in it, he's actually still supporting it. He's supporting the invisible prison that is around him, and he doesn't even know it because the bars are invisible, as Aldous Huxley would like to say. So, yeah. Leonardo da Vinci was right. There's three kinds of people. People who see, people who will see when shown, and people who will never see. Because he's still alive, he still has time. But unless he changes his environment, his experiences, and the people around him, he'll never change. So I'm going to leave it there, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for listening as always. Hopefully this is your Super Bowl antidote for this evening on Sunday, February 8th. Have a nice evening, and I will catch you on Wednesday where we will be talking again with Dr. Robin McCutcheon. Always great having her on. Good friend of mine, good friend of the show, and we will catch you then. Thanks for listening as always. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.